Duncan Fremlin here from the band Whiskey Jack. I recently spent some quality time with an exceptional man. He is Professor Emeritus, Department of Folklore, Memorial University of Newfoundland. He's a member of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame. He's won a Grammy Award. He's a broadcaster. He's the author of many books. He's a columnist. And I welcome him today. You're going to get to know him. His name is Neil Rosenberg. Wait for it. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. It's too bad it has to be virtual, but you're. I don't think it's any surprise to you to know that you have been in as a professional banjo player all these decades. You've been in my life from day one. There's a name that's been there. This elusive, mythical person who lives so far away from the center of traditional bluegrass, the United States, Tennessee, North Carolina, whatever, a person who has played such an important role in all of our lives, to those of us that are in the music business. So it's a particular honor for me to actually sit here and say, "Hi, Neil."
Hello there.
It's all about banjo. I'll warn you right now. Your credentials are all over the place. You have many credentials in many different fields, but this is strictly banjo. So only banjo nerds might be interested in what you and I are talking about today.
But I don't know a lot of them because I really don't hang out with banjo players. There just aren't very many of them around here.
Can you tell me? I know that Sonny Osbourne's kind of famous for stealing steel guitar licks and applying them to the banjo. Did you ever take a Canadian fiddle tune, for example, and try to transcribe it note for note on the banjo? Is that something you would do in arranging or learning a new song?
Let me just say, Sonny was somebody who I knew, and he showed me stuff when I was just getting started, and he conveyed that philosophy to me, learn from other instruments. One of the first tunes that I learned, here in Canada, we had we're going back a while, and you're the same age probably as I am, the fiddle LPs. There are more fiddle LPs, and these were mainstream things here in Canada in a way that they never were in the U.S. Frankie Rogers played Whiskey Before Breakfast, and I guess maybe Ted. I remember working it out with Ted, but I worked out Whiskey for Breakfast as close as I could to the way it was played on the fiddle, because I had no other way to know it. When fiddle tunes came in as a thing in banjo, that's back in the early '60s. Hung out with Bill Keith. He was working with Bill Monroe when I was managing Monroe's Park there at Bean Blossom. So I learned a lot of things and a kind of way of thinking about the banjo from Bill Keith during that time.
And before I forget, there is one question that I sort of made some notes, of course, but the one question that I was just thinking about as I was on my way to my studio here was, can you think of how living outside of the bluegrass heartland, that being Tennessee, North Carolina, how that might have influenced even though I know you have a history of personal history from that era and from that area and the musicians that came out of there, how does being detached from there for so many years, how has that influenced your perspective on bluegrass and the banjo in general, do you think?
Well, for me, it's been a nice combination because I was right at the center of things, and before I came here, I was in southern Indiana, and I worked at Bean Blossom and worked for Monroe, and I knew everybody at the time. It was this kind of a smaller world. I came here in 1968, And when I arrived, I just weeks before I'd been teaching down in Texas. I'd been at a fiddle contest and got up and played on stage with Byron Berline and jammed with Alan Munde and Sam Bush. And these are people I knew, and I still know them.
Yes.
So that, I had that inside experience, I guess you'd say. And over the years, I've had to learn to play the local music here. I became acquainted with a really fantastic accordion player named Art Stoyles. Art played with a group called Figgy Duff.
Famous.
It was a pretty famous group, and Art was a one of a kind guy. Art grew up in the kind of the rough and tumble of downtown. His dad was a longshoreman. He never learned to read or write. He did nothing but play the accordion, and he had a great repertoire. And I got into going to jam sessions at the home of a friend of his, a woman who is now my wife, and I picked up a whole new kind of music.
I asked this of Leroy Anderson. Leroy from Donna and Leroy on the Tommy Hunter show.
Okay, yeah. I know what you mean.
A spectacular banjo player. And so I asked him. So he's from Alberta, but he spent most of his professional TV life, at least in central Canada, Toronto. And then he spent a lot of time in Nashville. After that, they lived in Nashville for quite a while. So he has some influence from all of those different regions. I asked him if there was a Canadian banjo style, if there was something specific to Canada. He alluded to the fact that the Maritimes had, he didn't say this specifically, but what I got from it was that the Maritimes influence was greater than any other regional influence on banjo, and maybe certainly on fiddle, etc. Do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, and I should say that as a researcher, I taught in the Department of Folklore at Memorial, and my field work, my research was largely in the Maritimes. And I did that because I was surrounded by people here who were working on the Newfoundland stuff, and I didn't feel like I really had to do, that there needed to be somebody else doing that. So I got interested in looking at what's going on in the Maritimes. I lived in New Brunswick, south of Gagetown, just down on the river for a year, and I worked. I hung out with a lot of fiddlers, especially, and old time musicians. Not many banjo players. In fact, I didn't really know any then, except Vic Mullen. I've known Vic for many years, but the fiddle was really important. The sound, the Don Messer sound. I've written a bunch of stuff about Don Messer too. I think I sent you an example of our band doing St. Anne's Reel. I play St. Anne. Ted Rowe taught me how to play St. Anne's Reel, and I played with many fiddlers, and Canadians know how to play St. Anne's Reel. Americans don't. I've had early in my career, I was lucky to be able to play with a lot of really good fiddlers, especially Shorty Sheehan, who was at Bean Blossom. But I also, at various times I played with Clayton McMitchen, with Vasser Clements. I don't know, Roger Smith was an important guy for me. So, you're around those people, you hear that stuff, and it can't help but shape your thinking. And
are you playing a lot today, Neil?
I guess so. My wife plays the fiddle, and we play together two or three times a week. Not for a long time, maybe a half an hour, something like that. But we've been playing together now for 20 years or more. We have a repertoire, and one thing that's changed for me over this time is I've gotten into singing. And so the banjo has become an accompaniment to singing for me, and I've found that there's a kind of a mutual exchange there, back and forth between the voice and the banjo, and this is how I work on songs, is playing the tune on the banjo, playing what I'm going to sing on the banjo.
How are you remembering lyrics, Neil? Just curious about that.
Oh, so it takes me a while, I must say. I learn a tune pretty quickly, but getting the lyrics down so I don't have to think about them, that takes a while for me.
Has that changed your style, do you think, Neil? Accompanying yourself on the banjo, do you do anything different? I ask because I also took up singing later in life, and I don't play guitar, so I have to sit here in my studio and boom chicka with the banjo and make it compatible with the voice. Is there a certain do you use some of Pete Seeger's techniques, or is there you do anything differently to accompany yourself on voice?
I don't do any of Pete Seeger's stuff, but I look back and think to the banjo players who I really liked and listened to: Obray, Ramsey, Pete Steele, those guys. They fingerpicked, so 2 and 3 finger picking. So it just fits in very well.
Do you always use picks, or do you sometimes just use your fingers?
When I'm playing with Terry and with friends and stuff, I use picks. But when I play around the house, I play just with my fingers.
Do you frail, Neil?
No, I tried it. I was never able to get it going.
Do you have a warm up thing that you do? Like you pick up a banjo, you haven't played a couple of days. Is there something you do just to kind of get everything limbered up?
Yeah, there is one tune that I often play as the first tune to get going. It's a show tune called "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning."
Just to get you going, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if warm up is right. It's practice. It's making sure that I'm putting my fingers in the right place at the right time, and tone, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what Sonny Osbourne, before he died, he had a column on Bluegrass Today. He would answer questions. And he said, week after week, he would say to people, practice, 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 practice. And I took that to heart. I think it's really true.
Yeah. Have you ever over the years done any specific exercises to address speed? Because banjo, as you know, when we're 25, playing fast was kind of just what we did, but now that we're 75, that's a kind of a different story. So have you done anything over the years to develop your speed?
No, I don't think so. No. It never seemed to be a problem.
Do you set up your own banjos? Are you a banjo tinkerer?
Not much, but some, because here, there's no one around that does banjos.
Have you ever used a pickup on your banjo?
Yeah, I did back in the 80s. We had a radio station here in town that was all country, and I had a bluegrass show on it. And to promote the station, they started a band called there was CKIX, called themselves the Kickers. And we played a few gigs, and these guys were all electric, and I mean, I didn't have a chance without a pickup. So I got one of these pickups. I think it was called Jones.
Oh, the Jones Acoustic Plus.
Yeah.
Yes, I had one of those for many years. The only thing, Neil, that really worked in those days was the Jones Acoustic Plus. Yes.
Yeah, it bolted underneath, and you put a little piece of metal on the bridge.
Yes.
And I used that a few times, and it worked out okay.
I was reading there's an interview online with you from Banjo Newsletter. I don't know the year, but
oh yeah.
The question it ended with the guy. I think it might have been Bob Carlin that interviewed you. I can't remember. Any last words? Yeah, he said, any last words about your role as a musician? And you say, what is overridingly important and most interesting is making the banjo work in the context of a band. That's what I really enjoy and appreciate in other musicians who play the banjo. Elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, it's possible to, look at the world of banjo in terms of instrumentals and instrumental albums and licks and so on and so forth. But the fact is that when you're playing in a band, you've got to make your instrument fit in with what everyone else is doing. So it's a process of listening and fitting in with what the other people are doing. I enjoy that. I think that's what makes a band happen is when you're popping the rhythm when it's required, or putting in that little lick when the singer has said something and you want to respond. Those kinds of things are really nice, and I think that's when you go back and listen to Earl Scruggs, that's what you hear. You hear somebody who was really an ace at responding to what was going on around him, and so I guess that's what I mean by that.
Who do you enjoy today? Who's you put on? Do you listen? You listen to Sirius XM sometimes. So is there a? I mean, there's so many, Neil, that are amazing, just amazing.
I have to confess, I don't listen to bluegrass, except when I want to go and I'm writing something, or I want to go and check out a tune or something like that. And most of the time I listen to Philip Glass and French organ music. I don't really listen to contemporary bluegrass very much.